Good afternoon, everyone. We're going to give everyone a moment or two to get into the webinar, and then we'll begin promptly at 2 minutes after the hour. Thank you for joining us. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Tom Deary, and I am the Director of Codes for the Air Conditioning, Heating, and Refrigeration Institute. AHRI is the trade association representing manufacturers of heating, ventilation, air conditioning, refrigeration, and water heating equipment within the global industry. AHRI represents more than 330 manufacturers of air conditioning, space heating, water heating, and commercial refrigeration equipment and components. Welcome to the third and final session of our Introduction to A2L Refrigerants webinar series. This session will focus on state codes and legislation, as well as additional informational and training resources that are available on the subject of A2L refrigerants. And we're so glad you joined us for this last session. Before we begin, I would like to share the following disclaimer. The opinions expressed in this presentation and on the following slides are solely those of the presenters and not necessarily those of the Air Conditioning, Heating, and Refrigeration Institute. AHRI does not guarantee the accuracy or reliability of the information provided herein. This presentation is for general informational purposes only and does not constitute legal or professional advice. Please confer with your own legal counsel. And please also note that today's session is being recorded. I am happy to be joined today by Robert Glass, Manager of State Government Affairs for Daikin Comfort Technologies, North America. And before I hand it off, just a few quick housekeeping items. You may submit questions using the questions button, the Q&A button. We will answer questions as time permits, but I will also provide contact information at the conclusion of today's session, and I encourage you to reach out to me with any questions. Additionally, both the recording and the slides from today's session will be made available on AHRI's Safe Refrigerant Transition website after today's program. Robert, thank you so much for joining us today, and I will hand it off to you.
Thank you, Tom. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Robert Glass, and I'm the Manager of State Regulatory Affairs for Daikin Comfort Technologies. I've been working on A2L code adoptions and state regulation since starting with Daikin in 2020. Product safety standards like the binational safety standards UL 60335-2-40 and UL CSA 60335-2-89, and application standards like ASHRAE 15 are under continuous maintenance, meaning that the appropriate standards committee continually works on new materials and revising materials in the standards on an ongoing basis. These standard committees publish addendums periodically when new materials and requirements are added to the standards. And these are eventually consolidated into new editions, generally every 3 years. These updated standards are then adopted into the model codes during their triennial model code cycle. States adopt the model codes in whole, in part, or modified as needed by the individual jurisdictional requirements. State codes are generally on a 3-year or 6-year code cycle, but many states do not adhere to this regimen of code updates. The model codes noted below have been updated to reference the latest edition of the safety standards, the UL CSA 60335-2-40 2022 edition for air conditioning and heat pump equipment, and the UL CSA 60335-2-89 2021 edition for commercial refrigeration equipment, and application standard ASHRAE 15 2022, as noted by Stephen Spletzer during the first webinar in this series. Documents created by ICC and AHRI can assist AHJs and code bodies when updating jurisdictional codes properly allowing for A2L refrigerants. Tom will talk about these resources later in the webinar. 10+ years of research preceded the updating of safety standards and application standards to ensure that products using these new A2L refrigerants can be as safe, reliable, and efficient as possible. Several of these research projects that have been conducted are shown on the next slide. Over $8 million in research has been conducted over the last 10+ years to support this transition to new global warming potential, or GWP, group A2L refrigerants. This is just a small sampling of the research that has been conducted to qualify the updates to safety and application standards that are in use today and referenced in the 2024 codes. These and many more can be found on the AHRI Safe Refrigerant website, which Tom will provide more details on later in this webinar. The states noted below have updated their building codes to allow for the use of A2L refrigerants. All this information is also available from the AHRI A2L interactive map that Tom will show later in the webinar. The green highlighted states have updated their building codes to the latest editions of the safety standards, that being the 2022 edition of the ULCSA 60335-2-40 and the 2021 edition of the ULCSA 60335-2-89 standard, as well as the ASHRAE 15 2022 and the ASHRAE 34 2022 standards. Michigan is noted here as their mechanical code has been updated to reflect the use of A2L refrigerants, which was effective March 12, 2024. But the residential code has not been updated yet. Washington, D.C. has updated their building codes, but the finalization process has not been completed and risks extending into 2025 until effective. Starting in 2022, AHRI started to submit bills in various states that were, 1, home rule states or states without a statewide building code, example of Texas, Tennessee, and Missouri. 2, states where updating to the newest model code seemed too far off. As an example, Arkansas was on the 2012 model codes, so the legislative approach was logical for this state. And 3, states whose code cycles did not conform to the compliance deadline that the industry was facing. Currently, there are 28 states that have passed state laws prohibiting an AHJ from rejecting equipment using SNAP-approved low GWP A2L refrigerants, as long as the products are installed in accordance with the manufacturer's instructions and the SNAP use conditions. As noted at the bottom with the asterisk, Indiana has a state law which simply requires listing to a national standard by a nationally recognized testing laboratory for acceptance, as long as the code does not specifically prohibit the item. Each of these state laws has a derivation of the following. The state law prohibits an AHJ from rejecting equipment using new low GWP Group A2L SNAP approved alternate refrigerants that comply with the Federal Clean Air Act, as long as the equipment containing such refrigerant is listed to a nationally recognized standard by a nationally recognized testing laboratory and installed in accordance with its listing and with the use conditions identified by the appropriate SNAP regulation. Hawaii, Massachusetts, and Michigan still have active bills in the current 2024 legislation cycle. Some states have generated letters of acceptance, noting that the state has approved installations of any new equipment listed to the ULCSA 60335-2-40 or the ULCSA 60335-2-89 and installed in accordance with ASHRAE 15 and the manufacturer's installation operating instructions. This is one of the paragraphs from the Idaho letter dated March 31, 2023, outlining this blanket approval for any jurisdiction where the division is the code official in Idaho. This is one of the paragraphs from the Kentucky letter dated July 20th, 2023, outlining a similar approval of A2L equipped products for any jurisdiction in Kentucky. Work started on updating state building codes as early as April 2020. The successes shown on this slide represent the work that AHRI and member companies achieved through August of 2022. The following slides represent A2L status each month. As of August 2022, 13 states allowed for the sale and installation of A2L refrigerant equipment, and 6 other states had completed the approval, but the effective date had not been reached yet. The light green color represents states where the code updates or state law have been completed, but the effective date had not been reached. The dark green indicates where A2L refrigerant products could be sold and installed in that state with an effective date noted in that month's status. So the following represents the ongoing work that AHRI and member companies have done since September 2022 to get A2L refrigerants addressed in the states. This slide represents the current status of state A2L acceptance in the US. California is effective July 1st, 2024, and that state will be shown in dark green effective that date. AHRI and member companies are working to get the remaining states, Alaska, Hawaii, Michigan, Massachusetts, Nevada, and Washington, D.C., completed and effective before the end of this year, if possible. Special Department of Transportation permits have been acquired by AHRI member companies. Other companies can sign on to these permits for permission to be transporting A2L equipment and refrigerant. Tom will provide more information on this later in this webinar. Several U.S. territories have been contacted about updating their building codes to adequately allow for the sale installation of A2L equipment in these territories. However, we've received very little feedback to date. As a result, AHRI has drafted letters to the governors of these territories and has solicited signatures from a number of non-government officials, organizations to support the industry request to help in ensuring that building codes properly allow for A2L equipment. These letters should be sent this month. The U.S. territories that we're working with are Puerto Rico, U.S. Virgin Islands, Guam, American Samoa, and the Northern Mariana Islands. The main driver for acceptance of A2L refrigerant-equipped products in Canada is the B52 Mechanical Refrigeration Code. This is equivalent to the ASHRAE 15 standard in the U.S. The latest edition of this standard, B52 2023, was published in December of 2023. The B52 23 is equivalent to the ASHRAE 15 2022 standard. Environment and Climate Change Canada, ECCC, is the Canadian governmental organization, like the EPA in the US, who governs chemicals. However, the ECCC differs from EPA in that EPA specifically allows the use of alternate refrigerants with use conditions, while the ECCC only prohibits chemicals. As such, since A2L refrigerants are not specifically prohibited in Canada, they are allowed by ECCC. Most provinces have an evergreen clause, or automatically adopt, surrounding the adoption of updated versions of the Boiler Pressure Vessel Code and B52. While most provinces automatically adopt B52 when it is updated, there may be a time lag until this automatic adoption process is completed in each province. HRAI, the HVAC&R Trade Association in Canada and AHRI's counterpart, is tracking this information, and the most updated information is shown on this slide. Newfoundland and Labrador currently allow for A2L refrigerant products as noted on this slide. Manitoba has also adopted the B52 23 edition and therefore allows for A2L products. The URL of a letter noting this adoption is provided below. HRAI expects the remaining provinces to adopt the 2023 edition of B52 as noted on this slide. HRAI expects all provinces to adopt the 23 edition of B52 before the end of 2024, with the possible exception of British Columbia, which could spill over into Q1 of 2025. This ends my portion of the webinar, and I'll turn it back over to Tom to address available resources.
Thank you, Robert. So yeah, I want to take a few minutes to talk about available resources, and then we'll have plenty of time for Q&A. So if you do have any questions for Robert or for the material that I'm about to present, please feel free to use the Q&A box, and we should have adequate time to address them all. So on the subject of available resources, there are a number of items that I want to highlight. To start, I would like to highlight our interactive A2L refrigerant building codes map. Now, if you use the QR code on the screen, it will take you to the map. Um, and that's a screenshot of what the map looks like. I'm going to give you a moment just in case you do want to use the QR code. And then I'm going to pull up the map for a demonstration. And so I hope that'll answer perhaps some of the questions about it. But as I said, we'll have plenty of time if there are any of the functionality of the map that you want to revisit later. Please let me know, and I'll be happy to do so. But I do want to pull up the map, and this is what you'll see if you pull it up here. And if you're accessing it from a computer, you can click on a state and it'll bring up information relevant to that state. If you're accessing it from a mobile device, you will have to use this drop-down menu, and you can either scroll down and pick a state, or you can type a state into the bar up here. But I did want to start with California, and I'm not going to make you sit here while I click all 50 of these states. But California, I wanted to highlight for a couple of reasons. First, as you can see here, under AC codes, refrigeration codes and such, we do have, yes, they are updated. However, the effective date is July 1st, 2024. So as you can see, they're not effective yet, but we did want to note that they have been updated. And if you follow these links here, it will take you to the ICC landing page for California. And from there, you can find the specific code that you're looking for. We also note the addition of each of these standards that is currently referenced in California. And as you can see, by way of them updating their codes, they have also updated the industry standards to the 2022 editions for ASHRAE 15, 34, and UL 6335-2-40, and the 2021 edition of UL 6335-2-89, which, if you remember from our session 2 of this webinar, those are the answers that we want there. Those are the additions that are currently the most up to date. So that is good. But the other reason that I picked California was they have legislation. Now, if a state does not have legislation passed and you click on it, you will not see this. It'll just have codes at the top. But because California does, we have a link to what the bill name is. And then if we open this in a new tab, it will take you directly to the bill so that you can read the language of the bill and all of the pertinent information there. So that is a resource that's available to you as well. As I mentioned, some of the states have different means by which they've adopted or approved the use of A2L refrigerants. And Robert mentioned another case that I also wanted to mention. That's Kentucky. Now, if you just glanced at Kentucky when you pulled it up here, you'd see AC codes updated, no, refrigeration codes updated, no, and that doesn't look great. However, we noted that there is a letter of interpretation, and if you scroll down, we have created a link to that letter, and so we'll open that in a new tab as well. And right here, you have a direct link to the letter from Kentucky indicating that A2L refrigerants are allowed. So we've tried to compile all of that here and keep it updated. And so as states continue to approve A2L refrigerants, whether by legislation or whether by code updates, we do add those here. I also wanted to note one of the frequent questions that we get about this map is, can we have a similar map for Canada? And the answer is yes. We are working on that. So later this year, you can expect to see a similar map for Canada with the same functionality for each of the provinces, because we know it's critical to also track all of the updates in each province as well. So that's coming. And then, of course, we have a contact us button that goes straight to my email. So if you have any questions from this map, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. But it's a good resource, and hopefully it will be helpful to you. And if there are any questions from it, please don't hesitate to reach out. So I'm going to go back to the presentation now. And I also wanted to mention our page that Robert mentioned a few times. That is saferefrigeranttransition.org. And this web page is filled with informational resources about A2L refrigerants. This series of webinars that we are concluding here, along with the slides for each session, are posted on the website. So you can find those there, and this session will be posted, I would say, by the end of the week, along with the slides from this session as well. So definitely, if you want to access those, please go to that website. We also have a series of brief 60 to 90-second videos on A2L refrigerants that we developed back in the fall with in partnership with ICC and PHCC, the Plumbing, Heating, and Cooling Contractors Association. So those are all available on there as well. And we also have various presentations, as you can see from the screenshot, that highlight the research that was done in the lead up to this refrigerant transition. And as Robert indicated, more than 10 years of research totaling about $8 million was conducted on areas including testing, modeling, servicing equipment, and leak detection. So by reviewing the materials on this page, I think you'll be able to see the level of detail that went into developing the tools and standards that govern the industry. And of course, we're always happy to provide more information if you read through these materials and they generate additional questions. So I hope you'll check these items out as well. Robert also mentioned the DOT special permits, and certainly that is an item on which we have received an extensive number of questions, and we are more than happy to help out with that. Um, and yes, as you can see here, the Department of Transportation has issued 3 special permits to AHRI member companies, and these are all available, as Robert mentioned, for other companies, whether AHRI members or not, to become party to. We've prepared a helpful flyer to explain the differences between the 3 special permits, what each covers, and what the process is to apply to become party to them. So this is something that I can easily send you a copy of, and just ask that you'd reach out to me by email, which I'll provide at the end of this, and I'll be happy to provide you a copy. And then if you have questions that come from this about anything related to applying for a special permit, I'm more than happy to set up some time to chat about that as well. Kevin Scott in session 2 took some time to talk about warehousing and the updates to the 2024 editions of NFPA 1 and IFC, and how that affects how A2L refrigerants can be stored. So we have also generated a flyer that shows the storage requirements for cylinders containing A2L refrigerants. And here again, I am more than happy to provide this to you if you have questions. Just reach out to me and I can send you a copy of this flyer. And similarly, if this flyer generates additional questions, I'm more than happy to set up some time to chat about that as well. Certainly not just AHRI has developed resources. We are fortunate to have many organizations who have partnered with us in this refrigerant transition. And one of the primary allies in this transition has been ICC. ICC has developed a page that has lots of information about A2Ls, and I'm going to drop the link in the chat. Bear with me for a moment. And among the resources contained here, I am not going to drop the link in the chat, apparently. I'm having some technical issues. Apologies. But amongst the resources contained here are the amendments that are required for each edition of the previous model codes, the 2021 edition, the 2018 edition, etc. And what amendments would be required in regard to A2L refrigerants and bringing them up to the equivalent of the 2024 codes. So certainly that's a very helpful tool, and we're grateful to ICC for all of the work that they put into this. And as you can see from the screenshot, they also have the 60 to 90-second videos that we developed together on the A2L transition there as well. So a lot of helpful resources here too, and ICC has been an excellent partner in this refrigerant transition. Oop, I skipped a slide there, forgive me. Some other great training resources as well. I want to mention the Air Conditioning Contractors of America, ACA. They have an A2L refrigerant safety training course, which is available at the link you see there on the screen. Hardy, the Heating, Air Conditioning, and Refrigeration Distributors International, they have an A2L transition course, which you can also find on the screen, or sorry, at the link on the screen. So those are two great resources for learning more about A2L refrigerants. I also want to mention our counterparts in Canada, the Heating, Refrigeration, and Air Conditioning Institute of Canada, HRAI. They have a low GWP/A2L refrigerants course, which is available there at the link on the screen. And also ESCO International. They have a course titled Low GWP Refrigerant Safety, Flammable and Mildly Flammable Refrigerants, which is also full of helpful information as well. Stephen mentioned in session 1 of this series, the UL Fire Safety Research Institute has developed a course titled Firefighter Safety and Flammable Refrigerants. And this was a collaboration between UL, AHRI, and the fire service. So certainly I want to take a moment and remind everyone of that, and certainly encourage you to investigate that further. And finally, I just want to remind everyone that equipment manufacturers and refrigerant manufacturers also have training available. And so if there are any specific questions about products or specific types of refrigerants, those are also great resources as well. So please don't hesitate to reach out to manufacturers with more specific questions about products and refrigerants. And that concludes my presentation. So with that, I want to encourage folks to use the Q&A feature if there are any questions, and Robert and I are happy to take some time to answer them.
In the interim, Tom, I guess I'll add that the FSRI, that they use that research project as part of the premises for updating the IFC and the NFPA 1. So there was a ton of valuable information gathered out of that research project that helped the fire officials understand that A2Ls in any type of a fire are equivalent to A1s in a fire, and that there was no additional PPE required for first responders. So that's a good thing for people to understand that A1 refrigerants also burn, but there is no propagation, and that's the differentiation between an A1 and an A2L.
Thank you, Robert. We do have some questions, and so I think we'll jump in, and I'll do. We got one about the transportation of A2L, and so I do want to take a moment to look at our flyer in a little greater detail. So I have put the flyer on the screen, and just want to take a moment to note that, because the question was specific to transportation of charged equipment, and you'll note that there are two different uh, special permits that deal with charged equipment. Uh, DOT-SP 21287 and 21379. The special permit on the right is specific to cylinders. So if if you look through the table here, it does kind of highlight what the differences are between these special permits. And essentially, and I certainly encourage you, there's a lot more information on these special permits. So you'll want to go to DOT's website and look up the full permit language, of course. But on the second page, we have um, some other helpful information as well. Um, there is a materials of trade MOT exemption that is key and good to take note of in terms of when a special permit is necessary and when it may not be. So that's certainly something to read a bit more into. Um, we also make sure we always clarify for folks that if you do become party to a DOT special permit, you need to make sure that you renew it no less than 60 days before its expiration. If you do so, then the special permit is still applicable for as long as it takes for DOT to respond to your renewal application. But if you don't get it in, if you submit it less than 60 days prior to the expiration, then it does expire on the date that is stated on the permit. So that's key, and we want to make sure to emphasize that. We've also gotten feedback from DOT, and DOT has been great to work with on this topic. But they have emphasized that submitting the completed form to DOT, the best method of doing that is at this website, special permits at dot.gov. They do respond as quickly as possible. And again, at least with us, they have been quite responsive and quite helpful. So if you do have any questions, we do have some contacts at DOT who have been more than happy to help our other members and certainly happy to make that connection as well.
And Tom, there's another question about transporting A2L charged equipment into Canada.
Yes.
And I think I can speak to that in that these special permits allow the shipment of products across the border to the first destination into Canada. So if you have these special permits, that will give you the authorization to ship it to that first place into Canada. But then if they are shipped to other places, then that would have to be addressed by Canadian transportation regulations. And we are working with HRAI to better understand what those are and what processes need to be done to allow the transport of product to their final destination.
Yes. Thank you, Robert. We have a question that I think comes up a lot as well, talking about home rule states, and Texas is mentioned as one. I'll say anecdotally, I was just in Texas on Monday for a Texas Department of Licensing and Registration meeting where we talked about A2L refrigerants and updates to the Texas Administrative Code. But as you mentioned, Texas is a home rule state, and local jurisdictions certainly have the ability to adopt their own codes. The challenges in home rule states are why we pursued a legislative approach as an interim measure until the codes can be updated in a or in the each local jurisdiction. There are some home rule states where we were not successful in doing that, one being Nevada. And we've had to work with both the Northern Nevada chapter of the ICC, which covers Reno and all of the surrounding counties, and then the Southern Nevada chapter of the ICC, which covers Clark County and Las Vegas and all of the surrounding counties. So that has certainly been a lengthier approach, but that process is moving along. We are anticipating that it will happen um, in the timetable that the industry needs. But in terms of Texas, we do have a bill there. Let me pull up our state map so I can get the number correct.
SB 1210.
Thank you. So we do have SB 1210 in Texas, and that it does, um, it does state that a building code or other requirement applicable to residential buildings or construction may not prohibit the use of a substitute refrigerant authorized pursuant to 42 USC section 7671K. Um, that was passed and pursued by us to serve as a measure that would allow the use of A2L equipment in the interim while the codes are being updated.
An additional follow-on to that, Tom, is that the challenges with a home rule state is there's no one building code that's adopted across the state. There could be, and particularly in Texas, there are some jurisdictions use the Uniform Mechanical Code. Some use the International Mechanical Code. Some are on newer versions of the standard. Some are on older versions of the standard. Of the codes, and hence that's why the resources that you showed in your portion of the webinar can come into play, so that anybody, any code official that needs to update their codes, their jurisdictional codes, to allow for the A2L refrigerants, they can use those documents on the ICC refrigerant transition website, and that tells exactly what needs to be done from the 2012, 2015, 2018, or 2021 codes to update it to allow for A2L refrigerants. So that's in the resources that Tom noted from the ICC website, and encourage any jurisdictions that need to update the codes. That's an excellent resource to go ahead and use to help note exactly what needs to be done to properly address A2L refrigerants.
Thank you, Robert. And then we have another question mentioning the flyer on A2L cylinder storage and asking if there's a similar guide on A2L HVAC equipment storage, charged equipment. The short answer is we don't have a flyer that has been developed for that. I would point you towards the fire code for that jurisdiction that'll govern what is allowed in terms of storage for that sort of equipment. But I'll also note that the 2024 editions of the IFC and of NFPA1 were published later than the 2024 editions of the other codes due to some delays, and that has created a bit of a lag in adoption of the updated fire codes, and that is something that we are actively working to address with jurisdictions. We understand that there's still a lot of questions around warehousing, and that is at the top of our priorities for this year. So that is something that we are continue working towards. And as we get more information from jurisdictions and jurisdictions continue to adopt these updated codes, that's something that we'll continue to update on our map and publicize those updates as quickly and as efficiently as we can.
Yeah, as additional follow-on, Tom, I think that we at this point would encourage any dealers, distributors, anybody that is warehousing A2L HVAC equipment to contact their local fire department and to note updates that have been made in the 2024 editions of either NFPA 1 or the IFC, and to get them to review and identify any updates that may be necessary. It may be necessary for placarding to be put on the building with the mildly flammable refrigerants. But that's something that will have to be done at each jurisdictional level where businesses are located.
Thank you, Robert. And I don't see any additional questions. Oh, I do now. Um, do the home rule states also take into account ASME boiler pressure vessel code in terms of A2L? Um, we certainly are engaged with the ASME boiler pressure vessel code section 8, not necessarily on issues of A2L refrigerants. Um, certainly the way that each state adopts the ASME boiler pressure vessel code varies from state to state. Some states have exemptions that are built into their own state law. Some states adopt it directly without any additional exemptions. I have to say that most of our involvement there does not apply directly to A2L refrigerants. So I don't know if I'm perfectly answering your question, but we are quite engaged with that code and certainly trying to present the industry's needs there as well.
Yeah, and I think whether reference to home rule state or really any state at that point that adopts the boiler pressure vessel code, from the current standpoint, there's no difference between A1s and A2Ls. Whether states or jurisdictions have adopted the boiler pressure vessel code, right now there are exemptions in the boiler pressure vessel code for devices less than 6 inches in diameter. And as a result, whether it's A1s or the A2Ls, they fall into the same requirements of the pressure vessel code as it stands today.
Thank you, Robert. Well, I don't see any additional questions. So I really want to thank everyone for participating today. And I want to share my contact information again. Uh, as you can see, my email address, my phone number, both on the screen. And I encourage you to reach out. I always want to answer any questions I can or direct you to the appropriate person because we just want to make sure that everybody has the information that they need on this refrigerant transition. So on behalf of both myself and AHRI, I want to sincerely thank Robert Glass for sharing all of his expertise today during this session. And again, if you have any questions, please reach out. I really appreciate you all attending both today's session and the entire series. And I just hope everyone has a great afternoon and look forward to talking to you all again soon. Thank you.